Part 99. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 995. Chen Ryu pulled out a thread of death from Sudbai's body. This scene was truly shocking. And Angel's pupils shrank suddenly and her eyes were fixed on Sudbai, who had been ignored by her before. The 7 high-level French strongmen below were also extremely surprised when they faced the scene above their heads. The underworld appeared here so suddenly. When the water from the underworld hit the starlight hard, it attracted the 7 high-level strongmen responsible for maintaining the formation. Their bodies trembled at the same time, and the next moment, they immediately calmed down and activated the formation with all their strength to withstand this fierce blow. Chen Ryu stood on top of the underworld, her eyes slightly focused, as if she was now completely detached. And Angel let out a sharp roar in her throat. She no longer looked like a kind elder, and slowly closed her eyes. When she opened her eyes again, the entire outline of the Parc des Princes Stadium in Paris appeared in her eyes, even carefully. If you look, you can see everyone inside. The stars in the sky that had been shrouding the stadium began to rotate rapidly, and when viewed from a high distance, they turned into the shape of an eye. The yellow spring water began to be squeezed out frantically, as if everything in it had been drained out, and not a drop was left. Sudbai, who was in it, felt that his surroundings were completely blocked, and there was an inexplicable force pulling him. This place turned into a desperate situation in an instant. And Angel's expression was serious, and at this moment, every move she made seemed to carry a kind of majesty that belonged to a superior person and belonged to the stars. The stars are in the sky, looking down at all living beings. It is the stars that guide mankind from ignorance to civilization. Countless generations ago in the barbaric era, the ancestors worshipped the stars and chanted hymns. And now, he is the incarnation of the stars and the master of destiny. Today, you will surely prove it yourself. And Angel's breath began to surge again, and she let out a cold snort. You have no Deo, you only have strength, and you have no Deo. You will lose this game, you will lose for sure. When hearing Aunt Angel's words, Chen Ryu slowly raised her head, and a ray of blood disappeared fleetingly. Yes. The other party was right, she had no idea, she never knew what she was pursuing. For a long time, she has been pursuing power and tried every means to improve her strength. Even if she makes the slightest progress, she is willing to risk everything to get it. She originally thought that this situation would continue forever. She originally thought that there would be no end to the pursuit of power. But at the threshold of enlightenment, she stopped moving forward, even though her strength was still improving, even though she had not attained enlightenment but could be on par with a junior boss, but the more this happened, the more confused she became. She couldn't find her own way. This time, what she wanted was to prove the truth through killing. So she defeated Chicos and others outside the orphanage one after another, and then followed them all the way to the west, killing 2 groups of Western listeners in a row. If she continued to kill, Chen Ryu believed that she would definitely be able to prove the truth. She needs killing to accumulate, she needs stimulation from the outside world, and she feels that she has found the right path. But here she was stopped. This damn star, this damn light traps it. She could no longer kill people happily, just like a speeding sports car that couldn't continue to press the accelerator, and naturally couldn't increase its speed. The underworld water has been squeezed dry, and facing the oppression of the boundless stars, although Chen Ryu is not embarrassed, but compared to the strong posture of Aunt Angel, whose aura is rising all the way, and who may prove her truth at any time, Chen Ryu is indeed at a disadvantage. But this time, she may really become someone else's wedding dress and a stepping stone for others. Are you willing, Sudbai, who had been standing calmly beside him, asked. She can't beat me, Chen Ryu said, but there was no trace of excitement or joy on her face, because if she didn't interrupt, the French aunt in front of her might really be able to take advantage of the situation and succeed. But, Subai answered. I can't beat myself. Chen Ryu took a deep breath, with a hint of melancholy in her eyes. If you don't attain enlightenment, you will die. After Chen Ryu finished speaking, she looked at Subai. Now, are you more anxious than me? Subai shrugged. Although Chen Ryu blocked most of the pressure alone, Subai still felt uncomfortable. It seemed that he had returned to the state of being forcibly squeezed and isolated by the armored man. This was almost Subai's. It's a nightmare, because if it weren't for Lao Fugui's backhand that time, Subai would have fallen long ago, without any chance. So, do you need me to cheer you up and regain your fighting spirit? Subai asked. Chen Ryu shook her head, but I'm really confused. At this moment, saying I'm confused is almost as incomprehensible as the night before the college entrance examination when you suddenly think about the meaning of your existence. Just kill her, Subai suggested. Don't you want to prove the truth by killing her? You can't kill her, Chen Ryu said truthfully. Her accumulation is no worse than mine. The French ant began to shrink the stars below crazily. At the same time, she was also immersed in the excitement that she was about to achieve enlightenment. The state that had been stagnant for too long finally began to boil at this time. She was supposed to be with the previous group of big guys. When they got on the train together, she thought she had no chance, but now, the dawn appeared in front of her eyes. As long as the truth is demonstrated, there is a chance to survive. I'm curious, how did you extract the underworld from me? It only exists in my memory, Subai asked. Imitation. Chen Ryu frowned slightly when she answered. Because of the French ant's strength, the surrounding space was being compressed crazily, so much so that Chen Ryu herself felt a little powerless. Because I'm good at imitating, I learn everything very quickly, but it's also because I'm too good at imitating that I can't find what I should look like. Subai sighed, suddenly feeling very tired. Are you finally back to normal now? Chen Ryu looked at Subai and asked, not minding that the surrounding stars had compressed the space here to only a small room. You guess. Subai's eyes were still gray and white, but his whole person seemed to be more alive than before. People who often exercise know that if the human body reaches a limit, if it can persist, it will wait until this limit. When the energy wears off, you will find yourself suddenly relaxed, and at this time, Subai is more like a person who has entered a new critical point from extreme exhaustion. In fact, the reason why Chen Ryu followed Pjanik's formation this time was to use Subai's cause and effect to kill Jindao, while Subai had a new understanding during the fight with Lehman. He also needs constant fighting and high-level killing to obtain the continuation of this enlightenment. It's just that Chen Ryu wants to prove the Tao, while Subai wants to advance from the intermediate level to the high level. The surrounding space is still being compressed. This trap was set up by a strong man who was about to become enlightened, together with the top strong men in France. If the purpose was to hunt down two non-boss level listeners, then to a certain extent, it is indeed a bit luxurious. Tell me, how will you prove the truth? Chen Ryu asked. He. Chen Ryu suddenly laughed as she asked. Suddenly it occurred to me that if the place of enlightenment still existed and you buried a tombstone when you attained enlightenment, would there only be 3 words mental illness written on the tombstone? Subai ignored Chen Ryu's teasing, looked at the space around him that was almost touching his body, and said directly, if you don't cheer up, we will all die here. I originally thought that I could come with you and ride on your east wind to drive unparalleled all the way, but you suddenly told me that I was confused and depressed. Isn't this too deceiving? My little man, I've tricked you. What's wrong? Chen Ryu's fingertips shook slightly and continued, wouldn't it be better to share the same point with me? You're really not suitable to say such provocative words. It's too blunt. Subai suddenly thought of Ying. It's a pity that the woman who can always understand a man's inner thoughts should be in the United States now. She has left my own life. Below, 7 high-level French experts saw that their target was about to be crushed by the stars. They all excitedly added their strength again. After this time, there will be a big boss in the West, otherwise they will always think about their own side. There is no big boss and there are two in the East, which makes people feel insecure. Moreover, if there are big bosses in the West at this time, these two Easterners will not dare to pursue them unscrupulously at this time, regardless of whether they are there or not. Causal reasons. The excitement in Aunt Angel's eyes became more and more intense. Arrive. About to arrive. It's coming soon. Road. The way of the stars. My fingertips have touched it. Promise. Promise. Right before your eyes. Damies felt a little pity for Pjanik. If that guy could still be here and watch the annihilation of these two Orientals with his own eyes, it might be of great help to him to overcome this psychological shadow. Unfortunately. How is this possible? Dami's face suddenly changed. Are you really not in a hurry? Chen Ryu asked, but you will die. When I was at the place of enlightenment, I threatened to destroy the tombstones of all those who had attained enlightenment. Who was the first to give in? Subai asked rhetorically. Chen Ryu nodded, straightened her waist, and her black hair became flowing. She, who was originally a little depressed, showed her heroic appearance at this time. At the same time, she looked at Aunt Angel above, with a sneer on her lips. Your fruit is almost ripe, it's time for me to pick it. After saying that, Chen Ryu turned to look at Subai. I beat Luda for you at the beginning, and you haven't given me the rubbing of the tombstone I agreed to. Get it yourself. Subai pointed to his forehead. How do I know which one you want? Chen Ryu stretched out her cattails and caressed Subai's forehead, like an intimate gesture between lovers. But the next moment, a majestic and simple tombstone appeared. In an instant, the terrifying pressure of the tombstone belonging to the person who had attained enlightenment carried the path of enlightenment. The remaining terrifying aura of the hunter himself swept across all directions. But then, Chen Ryu invited the second, third, and fourth statue. Which one do you want? Chen Ryu sneered and said proudly. How can one time be enough? Today. I have to prove it 4 or 5 times. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 996. To a certain extent, the battle to prove the truth is more dangerous than the battle of mental power, because the physical body can recover after being damaged in the battle. If you get some heavenly materials and earthly treasures, it can speed up the repair, while the slightest mistake in the battle of mental power will damage the soul. It has a great impact, and the problems of the soul are more sensitive and acute, and more difficult to deal with the aftermath. The enlightenment is even more cruel. The winner can climb to the top by stepping on the other, while the loser will face permanent consequences. Shadow basically has no chance of ever attaining enlightenment again. Before, Aunt Angel was so powerful that she was almost one step away from achieving enlightenment. It seemed that the West would once again have a big-name audience after the last train left. However, as Chen Ryu took out tombstones one by one, things changed again. I, Chen Ryu, am here to attain enlightenment today. The phantom of a tombstone was pressed in front of Chen Ryu. Then, the tombstone collapsed. Chen Ryu's aura improved a bit, but she did not succeed in attaining enlightenment. But soon, Chen Ryu moved the phantom of another tombstone in front of her. The tombstone collapsed again. The tombstones collapsed again and again, but Subai had seen too many tombstones in his memory. This could actually be regarded as a hidden benefit for civil servants, but only Chen Ryu had the ability to realize it. The flowing tombstones demonstrated the Tao again and again. The monk's advancement at the expense of the Dharma cultivation of the ancestors of Qinglong Temple could be said to be extremely luxurious, but compared with the pomp and circumstance of Chen Ryu's Taoism in front of him, it pales in comparison. Subai stood behind Chen Ryu. At this time, he seemed a bit like the man standing behind the successful woman. However, this woman was really fierce. although she was rubbing things out of her memory time and time again. It's not uncomfortable at all. That little consumption of mental energy is just a drizzle for me now, but looking at her wasteful way, I'm really a little jealous. Without the place of enlightenment, without the tombstones, sometimes people always criticize the abomination of formalism, but at this time, Subai felt a little nostalgic for that kind of formalism. No matter what, it is better than everyone running blindly together now. Humming is much better. Chen Ryu's eyes were extremely deep at this time. The collapse of the shadows of the tombstones was to a certain extent the failure of her enlightenment. However, her aura and realm were rising again and again at this time. At the same time, the space that was originally compressed into an extremely narrow space began to slowly open up, and the stars in the sky seemed to be somewhat eclipsed when they encountered Chen Ryu in this state. And Angel let out a roar in her throat, like a wild beast roaring. As the saying goes, killing people's jobs is like killing their parents. In the battle for enlightenment, the party that loses will completely lose the chance of living. Reduced to trash to be destroyed and disposed of. Therefore, Ant Angel is naturally willing to do whatever it takes at this time. Fight. To fight. We must fight. Praise the stars, you are the beacon given to all living beings by the Creator, you are the clearest palace in the world, and you are the faith that I protect and uphold throughout my life. The stars last forever. And Angel's body began to slowly decompose. At this time, she had sacrificed everything she had to the stars. She did not leave herself any way out. Instead of living in failure, it's better to go all out and give it a last try. The top of the Parc des Princes Stadium in Paris began to burn, and the gorgeous scene like fireworks gave nearby residents a dreamlike vision, but the danger hidden in it was enough to make even high-end listeners fear and retreat. The 7 high-level French listeners below all stopped what they were doing, because at this moment, the battle situation was no longer affected by them, and the 2 people above were no longer fighting in a simple sense. Proof, for them, is no longer far away, but more like something close at hand. It is also something they must succeed in order to escape the audience's destruction plan. Now, this showdown is actually a great viewing. Damies took a deep breath and exhaled it heavily. At this moment, for the first time, he felt the greatness and magnificence of the enlightened person. Perhaps, the high-level audience symbolizes the pinnacle of human strength, and the enlightened person is more like it is another interpretation of man can conquer heaven, which transcends the ordinary meaning and is similar to founding a sect and becoming a saint. No wonder it was so difficult to attain enlightenment. Damies shook his head, feeling a little bit sad, but more than anything, he was envious, because he knew that it wouldn't take long before he would take the step, and he would definitely take the step. In the suburbs of Paris, Hills, carrying a silver box on his back, stood there, looking at the brilliance above the sky, with a little disdain in his eyes. It's just the last struggle of 2 wretched people who cannot realize enlightenment. Hills firmly believed that it would never be so difficult for him to achieve enlightenment, nor would he encounter such a situation. So, if the woman next to you loses, you will be dead, and I can't save you. The stars are burning. Tombstones are crumbling. At this moment, 2 women with deep accumulation began to compete beyond all material things. But the gorgeous stalemate is destined to be impossible to last, because according to the laws of nature, the more beautiful things are, the shorter their time is. From another perspective, people will always become accustomed to commonplace things. The momentum of both women has been raised to a critical point. In fact, they are quite pathetic. At least, in Subai's view, that's the case. Whether it is Chen Ryu or Ant Angel, how are they any worse than other people who have attained enlightenment? At this time, Subai felt more and more grateful for Boss Liang, who was so cowardly that he was barely able to achieve enlightenment through cowardice. Comparing one person to another, it really made people mad. Of course, the butt determines the head. Subai still hopes that Chen Ryu can win, otherwise, he will have to be buried with Chen Ryu. But just like the 7 high-level experts below are doing nothing and watching the show, Subai can't help at this time. No matter how busy I am, I can't find a place to lend a hand. But as a result, it really didn't take long for people to wait. The stars in the sky are the belief of this French aunt, and the pillar of her courage to move forward. In comparison, Chen Ryu is more different. The tombstones are broken so violently that they look like they are set alight with 2 kicks. After 2 bangs, it disappeared. Compared to the French aunt opposite, Chen Ryu was indeed a little less interesting. But she was actually sure of victory. Everything she had done before was nothing more than mutual encouragement. If she didn't persist and play with the other person, the other party wouldn't be able to be stimulated into this state. Chen Ryu, who originally wanted to prove the Tao through killing, is actually best at imitating, or in other words, copycatting. This moment, Chen Ryu's eyes flashed with starlight, and she raised her hands gently, like a graceful dancer dancing under the starry sky, with a kind of peerless elegance that belonged to her. Starlight. Stars. Great. Good. All of this, before today, was still so unfamiliar to Chen Ryu. At least Subai knew clearly that this woman had absolutely no hobbies in astronomy and no religious beliefs. She was just a stickler for anything other than improving her strength. She is an alien with no desires, but now, she has started to imitate herself again. Stars. Just love. Belief. Just change it. In an instant, Aunt Angel saw a scene that made her extremely horrified. The power of her stars actually penetrated the other party's body at this moment. Not only did the other party not suffer any harm, it was as if a mermaid had returned to the water. Become hardy, free, and comfortable. All these changes caught Aunt Angel off guard, and even more so in disbelief. But for Chen Ryu, it is just the steps that she has always designed. Everything has a certain number and a rationale. People who are good at imitating will naturally understand how to arrange each step. Just like now. The stars began to revolve around Chen Ryu, seeming to be surrounding its loyal believers and blessing her. And Chen Ryu also kept controlling the majestic power of the stars around her, slowly integrating it into her body. Immediately afterwards, Chen Ryu raised her head. In her eyes, there was no longer only Aunt Angel, only this sky. Immediately, her voice began to echo throughout Paris. Today, I have attained enlightenment here. Bury the stars. Establish my Taoist heart. Water. It's boiling. It's surprising, helpless, and unprepared. It seems like the script has been picked up by mistake, like the sun rising from the west. Aunt Angel had already turned into a star and made a desperate move, but everything about her began to desperately converge at Chen Ryu's feet. You thief, you thief, you shameless liar. Angry accusations echoed in the air. The fat French aunt was completely furious at this time. An ending more terrifying than death. It is a wedding dress for others. And this ending. She touched. Below, the 7 high-level players at the Parc des Princes Stadium in Paris all looked horrified at this moment. They never expected that a victory that they thought was inevitable before would be twisted to such a degree, and now they were unable to stop it at all and could only wait for the drama above to end before they could passively bear the consequences. Dami's body began to tremble. He knows. Aunt Angel, lost miserably, and lost completely. The shadow of a huge tombstone condensed in front of Chen Ryu. The tombstones are decorated with stars. What is buried, what is gained, what is lost, what is gained, what is lost and what is gained, are the essence of the operation of this world. But for Chen Ryu, what she buried was other people's things. Perhaps at this moment, her own path, her imitation, her habits, and her actions that she firmly believed in and adhered to gave her the most generous reward. The phantom of the star tombstone was smashed to the ground by Chen Ryu. At the same time, her breath is like a river flowing eastward to the sea. The atmosphere changed instantly. Promise. Success. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 997. If I am strong, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants. If I succeed in attaining enlightenment, it will be because I stand on someone else's tombstone. Perhaps, this is the best interpretation of Chen Ryu at the moment. Chen Ryu succeeded in attaining enlightenment and buried Ant Angel, who dedicated herself to the stars. This is a very unexpected ending and an ending that is difficult to understand, but since it has become a predetermined ending, so the extra feelings and emotions have become meaningless waste in an instant. Chen Ryu's figure is floating in the air, her long hair is fluttering, and she has a sense of familiarity with the white-haired witch practicing neon clothes in Liang Yusheng's works. She is a crazy woman, a bumpy woman, and of course, she is also a powerful woman now. Subai didn't know what attitude he should take to face Chen Ryu now. Of course, he knew better that the senior French audience inside and outside the Parc des Princes Stadium in Paris should be more distressed than himself. In the past, Li Qi came to England and wiped out a city. None of the many big bosses in the West were willing to sacrifice their lives to stop Li Qi. But now, at this critical moment when there are no bosses in the West, Chen Ryu, who has successfully attained enlightenment, is fully capable and even beyond. Everything Li Qi did left her own gift to the entire Western world. No one among the senior French audience inside and outside the stadium ran away at this time. Perhaps, they also knew that they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Escape has basically lost its attached meaning at this time, not to mention the unity of the gall rooster and the spirit of seeing death as home. After all, Chen Ryu can kill them all before she attains enlightenment, let alone attaining enlightenment. Then they lost an ant who was halfway to enlightenment. Perhaps, most of the audience present and the audience in other countries who are watching the showdown just now are thankful in their hearts, glad that this is the end of an era. Otherwise, with the current strength of the East, even among them one boss was left behind because he did not receive the train ticket, but at the same time, two more bosses were added to the East. Fortunately, the era is coming to an end, otherwise it is very likely that the Eastern audience circle will suppress the Western circle for a long time. By then, there will be a Li Qi and then a Chen Ryu. Maybe the Eastern audiences in the future will regard these two women regard themselves as their role models and come over again and again to try to achieve their own advancement by stepping on the Western audience circle. Slowly, the confrontation between the East and the West will slowly become the dominance of the Eastern circle, and the Western circle will also slowly reduce to a small circle like America and Africa. Broadcasting is a farmer who has to look at the harvest when planting vegetables. Once the harvest in the East is better, it is likely to increase the sowing area there and naturally reduce the sowing area in other places. Therefore, it now seems that the end of the Great Era has at least given some comfort to today's Western audiences. At least, they do not have to worry too much about the future, the responsibilities that come with it, and a series of other issues. Chen Ryu's figure slowly fell down next to Subai. How long do you need to advance? This is Chen Ryu's problem, but the key is not the problem itself, but Chen Ryu's intention to wash hands in a golden basin. Otherwise, according to Chen Ryu's habits and assumptions before she became enlightened, she would have killed all the way. Fight through it without asking any more questions. The gray and white colors in Subai's eyes have begun to gradually fade, and the fatigue is constantly weakening. Correspondingly, Subai's aura is also slowly growing. You can stop now. Isn't it inconvenient for you? Subai asked. In fact, Subai also guessed something. Chen Ryu smiled slightly. The radio just gave me a warning, and I have been restricted a lot of freedom. Special people are treated differently, Subai joked. If you still need to kill, I can ignore the warning on the radio. Its biggest punishment is to pull me into a story world and seal it. In the end, it still needs to send me to the train, Chen Ryu said. After all, I promised you 3 things. I said it, unconditionally. No need, I just watched you 2 women competing for the sermon, and I have a deep understanding. Now I need to restore some energy and blood. After these are replenished, it will be a matter of course for me to advance to the advanced audience. It's just a pity that Guy Janik ran away. Chen Ryu glanced at Subai in surprise and said, it turns out that you woke up a long time ago. Yes, if Subai didn't wake up, he would definitely continue to hunt down Janik at all costs, no matter where he went, no matter whether Chen Ryu would continue to help him. You can't wake up a person who is pretending to sleep. Subai smiled and looked to the other side. There is an old friend there. Are we going back through the magic circle of St. Paul's Church? Are you taking a plane? Chen Ryu asked. Okay, then I'll meet my old friend. Hills is a nobleman. Although there are many nobles in England who are down and out, Hills is obviously not one of them. He has his own manor and his own family business. This is our family's showroom. It contains antiques that have been collected for generations. Su, there are also your Chinese things in it, because one of my ancestors was a member of the British and French Allied forces, and they were also artillerymen. You know, artillerymen. But it is easier to load some personal goods back than those infantrymen, and even the British Museum once wanted to collect some things from my home, but my family members refused. Hills introduced his manor to Subai like a wealthy landowner. Unfortunately, he was carrying a silver box on his back, which made him look a bit nondescript. Subai was not very interested in these, but he could also learn some things about their family from Hill's story. In fact, Hill's family also fell into poverty a century ago, but several generations of them joined the army. Only by making war fortune can the family be kept together. After entering the house, Chris stood respectfully at the dining table where dishes and wine had already been arranged. Hills put his box aside, relaxed his muscles, poured a glass of wine for both Subai and Chen Ryu, and asked, the house outside just now is my family's collection, but below, this is my private collection. Are you interested in going down and taking a look? I have arranged a triple formation here. Without my permission, no one can. Oh. Chen Ryu held a glass of red wine in her left hand, opened a light curtain with her right hand, and then walked directly into the light curtain. Subai shrugged at Hills. Hills took a deep breath, meaning I can bear it. No matter how disdainful he had been when this woman was preaching, he could at least admit for now that no one in the entire West could suppress this woman. Following Chen Ryu's light curtain, Subai found himself in a very large basement. There were many objects on display, some of which were magical artifacts, and some which were not magical artifacts, just pure cultural relics. But if the display here is paired with convincing historical evidence, it can beat all major history museums around the world. It's very exquisite, Chen Ryu commented. These were basically carried out by Hills from the ruins of the ancient battlefield at the risk of his life, and Hills also spent a lot of time and energy to repair them. Perhaps, this is also the inheritance of the family bloodline. Since the family has been thieves of cultural relics for several generations, there is naturally a soft spot for such ancient objects in the blood. Subai was not very interested in these exhibits. He did not have much leisure to admire the light of civilization in that broken era. The reason why he came to Hills was purely to take a rest. By the way, why didn't you bring that box down? If I guessed correctly, the box should contain the holy cloth. You are really funny and you completely cosplayed into Saint Seiya. I don't want to fight you now, Hills said righteously. I can feel that you are very tired now, Su. You need to rest. When you have rested and your realm has reached a high level, I won't. Do you mind competing with you again? Same as her and the French aunt, Subai glanced at Chen Ryu and continued, who wins and who becomes enlightened? Maybe, but it's not that difficult, at least for us. Hasn't broadcasting closed off the places of enlightenment in the East and the West? I'm currently working on ways to reopen the places of enlightenment in the West. Are you sure? Subai asked. That's the collection room of broadcasts. I don't think broadcasts will completely block it, and I'm not ready to give up, so I think there is hope. No matter what, as the former guardian of the place of enlightenment, I will return to enlightenment in the future. Going to the place of enlightenment can give me the sense of sacredness and ritual I want. Even if I fail, I still feel that lying there and sleeping forever is not a bad thing. Subai ignored Hill's lament and looked at Chen Ryu. Chen Ryu raised a finger to Subai, meaning that she could help Subai try to open the eastern land of enlightenment, but she would have to consume a thing. At this moment, Subai's cell phone rang. It was the cell phone that Hills had just given to Subai. After all, Subai's self-explosion and body-damaging battles would have turned into a cell phone if it weren't for the special windbreaker on his clothes. Naked, male, let alone a mobile phone. Hey, fatty, what's wrong? Dabai, are you still alive? I'm ready to put the Qin general's armor on them. Should we do it now or wait until you come back? The fat man asked. Fat man, do you still remember the blood corpse? Subai asked. What? Believe it or not, when you put armor on one of them, maybe a second ago, either you were pulled into the story world or that person was pulled into the story world. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 998. Temporarily letting the fat man calm down, Subai and Chen Ryu had dinner together under the arrangement of Hills. Afterwards, Subai and Chen Ryu went to St. Paul's Cathedral in London together. In fact, Subai also knew in his heart that Chen Ryu was not suitable to appear here now. He might still be able to gain some freedom before attaining enlightenment, but after attaining enlightenment, it would be difficult to have that kind of freedom. Broadcasting may not be like killing chickens and warning monkeys like it is with blood corpses, but it is still okay to find another way to seal you and keep you fresh. Although Lychee in the past went to England and wiped out a city after his enlightenment, according to Fatty the said Lychee also disappeared for half a year after that. This half year may have been to atone for his sins or to be sealed by the broadcast. Although he finally gained freedom and could even come back by train to visit, he still paid a price after all. In the forbidden area deep in the church, the remains of the dead junior and senior audience members were still scattered there. Subai didn't know his name, but he was considered a poor man. Janik was not dead. As a result, he was helping Janik. The guy who Chi opened the magic circle became the first person he and Chen Ryu killed when they came to the West. I will go to the orphanage to bring your son out, and then help you try to open the Eastern Enlightenment land. Have you thought about the third difficult thing? Chen Ryu asked while repairing the formation. She has always had this temperament, and since she now owes Subai 3 things, she must be thinking about completing them as soon as possible. My son should wait until I achieve enlightenment before picking him out. As for the Eastern Enlightenment land, you really need to try it to see if it can be opened again, Subai replied. Chen Ryu seemed a little surprised by Subai's answer, because she thought Subai would be impatient to ask her to rescue his son. You must know that the formation arranged by Li Ji is not difficult to break, but if you want to break it before at the same time, a big shot listener must be personally involved in the danger to rescue the child inside safely. Even with Chen Ryu's strength, the success rate of completing this task is only a little over 50%. If he can fight hard, if he died, the success rate should be around 70%, not less than 80%. But even so, Chen Ryu did not object, and even took the initiative to bring up the matter. 1 is 1, 2 is 2. She would not refuse or break her promise just because of danger. I can feel that he is sleeping peacefully in the orphanage. I want to pick him up personally after I preach. Can't you trust me? Yes, I can't trust you. Subai told the truth. You can't understand the feeling between father and son and the impulse and willingness to protect each other at all costs. In order to save himself, the little guy crawled to the demon cave by himself. Subai was naturally willing to do anything for the little guy. It was not that Subai was worried that Chen Ryu would deliberately betray him. Subai believed that Chen Ryu would definitely fulfill her promise to him. But Subai was unwilling to entrust the little guy's safety to others, because he couldn't bear the accident of less than 30%. After he attains enlightenment in the future, it would be best to go in and rescue the little guy safely. If there is no other way, or if something unexpected happens, then it seems like a good ending for the father and son to die together inside. As for whether Subai wanted to see the little guy as soon as possible, of course he did, but he was not in a hurry. After all, he was going to leave here by train after he was enlightened, and the little guy would stay here with Ji Xiang to continue his life. Father and son will eventually separate. I can't 100% open the place of enlightenment. If it is opened, it counts as one thing. If it is not opened, it doesn't count, Chen Ryu said. You are really an honest person. Subai shook his head. It won't be long before I start trying to achieve enlightenment. When the time comes, I can actually do what I need you to do. At the worst, the fat monk and the others are far away from each other. Enlightenment is not far away, so we can let them help. For example, what about killing Lichi? Chen Ryu suddenly asked. Subai's eyes narrowed, as if he didn't understand why Chen Ryu would ask this question at this time. Don't tell me you don't want to kill her. She kidnapped your son and put him in this dangerous situation. Your character, at best, is impulsive and mentally ill. At worst, it's actually an extreme form of revenge. We'll talk about this later. Now is not the time. Subai paused and continued, perhaps, after finding a way to successfully send the signal, the Lichi over there may also die. Maybe, but have you found a way? How did the blood corpse conceal its identity in the first place? Subai asked. You ask me, who should I ask? Haha, among the people I have come into contact with since I became a listener, there are only 5 people who can avoid the broadcast's gaze. My cheap parents have an agreement with the radio and have now integrated with the radio. They count as 2, but that is because the radio deliberately opened up to them, so they only need to keep a low profile, and under the constraints of the rules, they don't have to hide it from the broadcasters, just from other listeners. It's a bit similar to the corruption of high-ranking officials. There are unspoken rules. People at his level and people at higher levels will turn a blind eye to it. Just be careful not to get caught and post it online to cause too much public opinion effect. There is nothing wrong with it and attention. In fact, there is nothing to learn from. In addition, Lizzie is also one, because Lizzie once calculated a group of listeners who tried to come back to that world, and she could also come back by train and then leave. I don't know if she has any deal with the radio, but at least it is certain. She has some kind of privilege. Lao Fugui can be counted as one, but Lao Fugui is special. He may have died long ago, so from the perspective of the broadcast, a dead person is a person who does not exist. The last one is the bloody corpse. When the blood corpse massacred a large number of listeners in Shaanxi and built Jingguan in the Terracotta Warriors and Horses Mausoleum, the radio had no way to deal with him because the radio did not know his identity. By chance, the fat man said the words Yezi. Only when the words came out did the broadcast confirm the true identity of the bloody corpse. So, do you know the way the blood corpse hides its identity? Not sure, but I can guess, Subai replied. At this time, Chen Ryu also repaired the formation. When the formation flashed with white light, Subai and Chen Ryu walked into it together. Chico's, Macron, and Zack were placed in 3 wine jars like human sticks. The wine jars were located below the founder of the Sanking dynasty, one for each person. It's not that Fatty Monk and the others deliberately abused the prisoners, but these three guys are not ordinary people. Everyone knows how terrifying the vitality and methods of high-level listeners are. Furthermore, their bodies were basically broken by Chen Ryu before. It's also just convenient for stuffing in. However, despite this, the fat man and the monk added several seals respectively to isolate them from the possibility of recovery as much as possible, and even inflicted some damage on them every once in a while to ensure that they were still in a weak state. To be honest, even in the previous battle, Fatty didn't feel so tired. It was like defusing a bomb. If it was successfully defused, everything would be fine. If it failed, it would be an explosion. Life and death were instantaneous. It was easy to come and go, but if it turned out to be, if you eat, sleep, shower, and hit your back with a bomb, it won't be that pleasant. Hoo hoo. The fat man snored while leaning on the altar table. He was really exhausted. The monk and Lord Buddha were sitting in the distance, drinking tea. Lord Buddha was also seriously injured, and he had just advanced in battle, so it would take some time to recover, and he could no longer take action for the time being. Although the monk was also injured, as the monk was now, the background is quite manageable. There were some high-level listeners from the southwest staying outside the small temple. Apparently, they had also smelled a special rumor. However, because they did not immediately join in to help during the previous battle, no one chose to enter at this time. The most important thing about the temple was how powerful Chen Ryu was in defeating 3 high-level experts before she left, which shocked them so much. "Fat man, if you are tired, go back and rest," the monk said. The fat man opened his eyes, wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth, walked to the tea table in a daze, picked up the teapot and took a deep breath, shook his head and said, "I'll wait for Dabai to come back, it should be soon. Dabai told me on the phone before that Chen Ryu had succeeded in attaining enlightenment. Oh, I regret it. I should have gone with him and went to the west to pretend to be cool. I regret it. No one stopped you before," Buddha said from the side. "Damn, how can that be the same? I'm not mentally ill." The fat man picked up a piece of dried tea from the tea table and threw it into his mouth, chewing it. "This dried tea tastes bad. It's not as delicious as the white put." Buddha ignored the fat man and continued to analyze with the monk. "It seems that this armor cannot be tried randomly now. Broadcasting has its own safety mechanism and code of conduct, which makes broadcasting a bit pedantic and rigid. It is impossible for it to sabotage our actions in advance. But it is fully capable of interrupting it a second before we act. By the way, Dabai asked me to go find some explanation on the phone." The fat man seemed to have remembered something and shouted, "Damn, I was so busy sealing those 3 that I even forgot about it." The fat man seemed to have remembered something. He took out his mobile phone, glanced at it a few times, and said with some doubts, "I sent a message to Xiezhen and asked some people, but I didn't find out anything about Xiezhen's whereabouts after he separated from us in Lishan. This is strange. You can ask Boss Liang. I'm not that shameless, and I don't have Boss Liang's WeChat account. Forget it, let's talk about this later. By the way, Subai told me that Chen Ryu promised to do 3 things for him." Chuji boring, the fat man started gossiping. Haha, Buddha smiled. "Let me tell you, 3 things are very simple." The fat man's soul of gossip began to burn: rescue my son, be my son's mother, and give me a son. Hee, do you want to eat or not? Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 999. After the fat man finished his flowery performance, he suddenly noticed that the monk was looking at him with a meaningful smile. Why was this smile so alarming? "Monk," the fat man asked. "Fat boy, look behind you," the monk reminded. "Ha ha ha ha, you can't scare me. Do you want to tell me that Chen Ryu is behind me?" The fat man picked up another piece of dried tea and threw it into his mouth. Fat man, I have a clear spiritual sense. Although I can't beat her, but if she gets close to me, I can still sense it. The fat man looked like you were using this trick to scare me. Do you think the fat man, graduated from Xiamen University? Buddha took a sip of tea at this time and said, she never attained enlightenment before. The fat man was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Although my heart was pounding, I still had an expression on my face as if you were looking down on me, and then I turned my face and looked behind me. Sister Chen, when did you come back? Why didn't you say hello so that your loyal fat boy could boil the bath water for you first? Our temple hasn't installed a water heater yet. In the living room, the monk made another pot of tea. Sudbai was lying on the tatami and drinking tea. Buddha was in the same posture, but the monk was still sitting upright. The monk seems to have always been serious. The Buddha has become a bit corrupted, especially after he has changed his mind and advanced to a senior audience. He has become more and more arbitrary. However, the monk has another extreme trend, which is combined with Qinglong. The Dharmakaya cultivation of the temple's founders became more obvious. Of course, the monk's dharma is natural, and he is actually the one who knows how to adapt best. I remember when we first met, the monk wanted to eat the little guy to increase his cultivation, and he was so cruel that he didn't look like a monk at all. Haha, you can do it too. Your ancestor just wanted to play a little game while drinking tea and admiring the cherry blossoms. In the end, you, a guy who deceived his master and destroyed his ancestor, swallowed them all. After listening to the monk's description of the advanced process, Sudbai joked. Kilv, it seems that monk Huiguo was your previous life. Buddha's focus is naturally different from Sudbai's. He himself is also a branch of Tantric Buddhism. Although their respective developments have changed in thousands of years, if it is true to be more serious, monk Huiguo can be regarded as one of Buddha's ancestors. In other words, Kilv's status instantly overshadowed his own. Buddha teaches about the afterlife, but for people, the natural belief is that there is this life but no afterlife. Monk Kilv was naturally not bored enough to argue with the Buddha about seniority issues. Monk, then you are also a high-level person now, Sudbai confirmed. It's really hard to see through. No wonder the group of bodhisattvas from India wanted to catch you, but they didn't expect you to be so powerful. If time were not tight, the poor monk would not be willing to advance in this way. In fact, it goes against his state of mind. Monk Killa clasped his hands together and said, Okay, stop being so coy. Is it still a big deal for you, Chi Lv, to bully your master and destroy your ancestors? Sudbai stood up and stretched. Chen Ryu was in her own room, so naturally she would not have a small party with Sudbai and others to drink tea and chat. Dabai, are you going to advance too? Lord Fo looked at Sudbai. It's almost there. In fact, I was about to advance before going to the west. What happened this time has made me more prepared. I have also made great progress in the use of power and my new adaptation to fighting methods. If you can't choose something hard, it will definitely be very frustrating for whoever is your opponent. The monk smiled, but don't be too strong and easy to break. You still need to rest. Well, so I suppressed it and did not advance. I planned to wait until my body relaxed before making any plans. I was not in a hurry. By the way, Lord Buddha, thank you this time. Is there any problem with you? Buddha had forcibly advanced in battle in order to protect the orphanage. The side effects of this method were definitely obvious and might even affect future development. Sudbai just thanked him and could only find opportunities to compensate Buddha in the future. Everyone chatted without a word. Late at night, the monk went to prepare supper, and the Buddha began to meditate. Sudbai, who had nothing to do, finally thought of my good brother Fatty at this time. Walking out of the living room and entering the Sanking temple, the 3 high-level Western powerful men continued to be placed in the wine jar, with the seal imposed by Chen Ryu herself. Not to mention that they were seriously injured now, even in their prime state they wanted to. It's not easy to break Chen Ryu's seal. At the moment, a 4th wine jar appeared, with a meatball stuffed in it. The fat man had a silver needle pierced on his head, and he was looking at Subai, who walked in with despair. "Don't look at me like that." Subai sat down next to the fat man. Looking at the fat man with only one round protruding from the wine jar, Subai wanted to laugh. "Dabai, you are not a brother enough," the fat man felt aggrieved. "You're tired too. It's time to take a rest," Subai comforted. "Is this also called rest?" The fat man felt like crying at his current situation. "Who told you to be a mean-mouthed person? It was Chen Ryu who put you in the wine jar. She also inserted the silver needle into it. The monk didn't dare to pull it out for fear of an accident. Let's do this." "I'm not afraid of an accident. I help you pull it out," Subai said, trying to pull out the silver needle from the fat man's head. "No, no, no. You are not afraid of an accident, I am," the fat man quickly shouted to Subai to stop. Haha, Subai smiled and didn't dare to actually pull it out. In fact, Chen Ryu did this not intentionally to torture Fatty, but because Fatty was overdrawn in the previous battle and his Taoist heart began to become unstable. Chen Ryu, it can be regarded as personally taking action to help Fatty stabilize his Taoist heart. At the same time, Fatty also needs to calm down and meditate. It is tantamount to paving the way for Fatty in disguise. Fatty has too many thoughts and is too messy. This was a good habit in the past, but after becoming an advanced listener, every step forward is very difficult. It requires not only the accumulation of strength but also the realization of the realm. "Did the mother-in-law say when she would release me?" the fat man asked with a pouted mouth. "Wait until you advance to the intermediate level." Subai took out 2 cigarettes and lit them in his mouth, then took out one and handed it to the fat man's mouth. Unfortunately, the fat man couldn't take it out, so he could only shake it with his mouth. The ash was shaken off. "Well, that's fine. I suddenly found that I haven't really calmed down and looked at the founder of Sanking for a long time." The fat man had a very sad tone. "Communicate more with the patriarchs, communicate more. You see, the monk has done a good job in this." After communicating with the patriarchs, he swallowed the Grand Master by the way. "If you can swallow the Sanking, you will be awesome. Now that you have made a fortune, I guess you can throw Chen Ryu into the wine jar and let her find Jing Jing." The fat man smoked a cigarette with a sad look, then glanced at Subai. "Dabai, can you calm down your gloating expression? Is it obvious? Oh, this is like a humming arms race. Everyone is trying their best to find a way to advance. It would be great if the Eastern Land of Enlightenment could be opened again. You are the former guardian of the place of enlightenment. If the Land of Enlightenment can be reopened, you should have special advantages. We will collect tickets there then. Those who want to go to the place of enlightenment to experience the traditional feeling of enlightenment must pay us an experience fee." The fat man started to have sex again. "Come on, as long as we can pass the signal out, we will turn it on again even if we don't turn it on." "Then why are you wasting your time asking Chen Ryu to help you open it?" Fatty asked, a little confused. When the place of enlightenment was opened by broadcast, it belonged to a special area. It was regarded as broadcast's own private area. It was also affected by the rules set by broadcast. But now that broadcast has closed it and reset it, it has lost its original function. It is equivalent to turning into a secret realm. If we can enter it before the broadcast opens it again, we can get some special benefits. Subai thought of the jade seal of the Dian kingdom in the place of enlightenment. Although that jade seal could not be compared with Zolong's national jade seal, its power should not be underestimated. Previously, he was a guardian, so he could not use it. That thing is his own, but if Chen Ryu can help him open the seal of the place of enlightenment this time, he will definitely find a way to bring that thing out. Broadcasting is strictly restricted by rules in the real world. As long as he can get out the jade seal of the Dian Kingdom, broadcasting can only hold his nose and admit it. Perhaps, it is precisely because of the rules of radio that today's listeners are given the greatest degree of freedom. Otherwise, if radio has self-awareness and unlimited power to fire, the listeners will completely become pigs waiting to be slaughtered. Rules are a necessary condition for stable continuation, but at the same time they also have their own limitations. Of course, Subai also desperately wanted to have a magic weapon, otherwise it would be satisfying to have to fight with his fists every time, but he also felt a little embarrassed. By the way, why did General Qin's armor come to Jizhen? The fat man was puzzled by this. To be honest, I can't contact Jizhen now. I think something might have happened to Jizhen. Do you still remember, back then? In Lishan, Boss Liang suppressed Fusu but revealed Fusu's ring. I felt something was wrong at that time. Because of the way the blood corpse hid from the broadcast, I can probably guess why it went crazy. Why did it become like that? Why did its temperament change drastically? Why did it even make such a low-level mistake as talking in its sleep? Subai spat out. Taking a puff of smoke, he continued, because we are listeners, our eyes are the eyes of the broadcaster, and our ears are the ears of the broadcaster. The blood corpse appeared in an appearance that none of us recognized, but he also hid it from the broadcast, so I think the blood corpse must have deliberately forgotten who he was, leaving only the original impulse of revenge. So, this is the purpose of finding a solution. Yes, Ji Zhen is proficient in mental power and illusion. If he is here, we can work together to completely disrupt the consciousness of one of the three guys, and then play a trick of grafting and grafting to create a bloody corpse. As long as the broadcaster does not know its identity, and even if it knows that we are going to send a signal, the broadcaster is limited by the rules and can only watch us act. Then we have to find a solution as soon as possible, otherwise these three will enter the next mission world. Don't worry, Xie Zhen is missing. The one who is most worried should be Boss Liang. That's right, they are true love. The fat man spit out the cigarette butt and asked in a mean tone, tell me, since Ji Zhen and Boss Liang have lived together for so long, have they ever opened each other's back door? After finishing speaking, Fatty suddenly found Subai staring behind him. Damn it! It can't be so unlucky. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1000. Just as the fat man was about to turn his head and look behind him as if he had seen a ghost, Subai reached out and patted the fat man's face. I'm scaring you this time. Fatty. Half a century ago, humans have left their footprints on the moon, but in fact, humans have not been able to fully explore the planet under their feet, such as the sea. The ocean symbolizes vastness, but also a kind of loneliness, especially in its depths. This loneliness, if nothing else, is basically equivalent to eternity in disguise. In a cave in the sea near Qinhuangdao, Ji Zhen was slumped on a round platform. His suit had become messy. He looked like a poor man in jail, and his sentence was indefinite. Apart from the mottled loneliness, the only person who accompanied him was the other person in his body. Although Xie Zhen had tried every means to take back his body and expel that person at the same time, at this moment, in this situation, it seemed that only by existing can one's sentence no longer be completely uneventful. There is no sympathy for each other, the concept of body initiative is beyond everything. This is the first time Ji Zhen has tried to expel that guy from his body, and he does not know how many times he has failed. He no longer wants to expel it. After the other party, he can regain his freedom, but he has to do something. Su Yuhang's words "please sleep for another 2,000 years" completely sealed this place. That man, that woman, their identities, and the impact of their identities were enough to turn this seemingly joking sentence into a golden rule. Xie Zhen didn't take the time to think about why his boss gave the ring to him, why he didn't give it to Subai, Fatty, or even Chengdu audience member Chen Guang. He didn't want to think about this problem. After all, he had to keep some better reveries and memories for himself. At least, he didn't want to turn himself into another version of MRS Xianglin. The cigarette was long gone, but a cigarette appeared next to Xie Zhen. He skillfully took out one, bit it between his lips, lit it, and took a puff. The familiar tobacco taste, familiar smoke rings, and familiar habits. Xie Chen knew clearly that this was just an illusion blessing for himself. As long as he simulated the feeling of a cigarette, he would feel like he was really smoking. This is a kind of self-deception, and it is also a kind of painting cakes to satisfy hunger, but in fact, he does not need to eat. At the level of an advanced listener, he can basically live without food, as long as there are fragments of energy left around for him to absorb and transform. You can continue to live on your own, but of course, it's impossible to live in an isolated area like that train or other areas. Fortunately, this is the bottom of the sea. Fortunately, the spiritual energy here is quite sufficient. At least I don't have to worry about becoming a human being. Therefore, explaining what you have to do every day is very simple, but also very rich. The first thing I did when I woke up was to try to expel Fusu, and then failed. Then it's breakfast time. Ji Zhen can put himself into the fantasy world of eating breakfast. There is milk, fried eggs, and even caviar from paddlefish. As long as it is something he has eaten and felt, he can put himself in the fantasy world. Perfect to re-experience. After that, there will be reading newspapers, listening to music, karaoke, noise-cancelling headphones, and everything else you need will appear, and then there will be a richer lunch, with various Western and Chinese dishes, rotating. Even sometimes, he would choose to have barbecue for dinner if he was interested in learning about it. As long as he could calculate the thickness and progression of cumin and salt as well as the changes in the meat texture and heat, he could completely grill himself the different flavors of old and tender. Of meat skewers. It seems that this kind of prison life is not bad. But Xie Zhen felt more and more bored. He knew that it was all fake. Everything he did was nothing more than bringing him psychological comfort and hints. But the pain was that he had to keep the last word at all times. Very sober, because once you sink in completely, it is equivalent to tying a plastic bag to yourself and suffocating yourself to death. Just as Subai repressedly chose to take the initiative to go to hell to seek relief when he was forced to stay in the place of enlightenment by the old rich man for the first time, Xie Sun is also faced with such a choice now. He can immerse himself wholeheartedly in the illusion he created, but the price is that he will never wake up. He is still weighing, at least. Wait a little longer. Let's see. What if it changes? Of course, Xie Zhen has given up hope that he will enter the story world again, unless he completely and overwhelmingly expels Fusu or controls Fusu and turns him into his totem and accompanying soul. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the broadcasters to pull themselves into the story world, because it was Su Yuhang who sealed himself here personally. What Su Yuhang represents behind him is the will of that existence. There is no need for them to take off their pants and fart. Seal yourself and then release yourself by entering and exiting the story world. Of course, they also have to follow the rules of the broadcast, because the broadcast can determine that the current gift is not the real gift, so they cannot transmit him to the story world. Xie Zhen didn't know how long he could hold on. Maybe he was not detained for long, but this was not confinement, because you can't see hope at all. When a person is completely desperate, time really has no meaning. The cigarette butt flickered on and off. Xie Zhen held the cigarette butt in his hand and felt the temperature and heat of the cigarette butt. It has to be said that in the past half-month, the most dumbfounding thing for Xiaozhen was that his level had actually been elevated to the level of an advanced audience. The level of the middle-level peak. He didn't know whether it was because of the fusu in his body or because he tried to deceive himself out of boredom, which caused a qualitative change in his illusion. But this at least gave him some comfort, or in other words, gave him another way. Either, you will always be immersed in loneliness until one day you are completely lost in the maze of illusion, or, you will just be confused and succeed in enlightenment in that way. If the enlightenment is successful, there should be a glimmer of hope, right? At least, I should be able to expel fusu at that time, right? Every day, with these miscellaneous thoughts and cigarettes, Xiaozhen thought about how Subai had endured half a year in the place of enlightenment. Click. In the distance, there was the sound of footsteps, which should be the sound of leather shoes stepping on puddles. Xiaozhen raised his head slightly, and a rare glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes that had lost most of their energy. The visitor walked very slowly, as if hesitating or overcoming. In fact, those who can walk in here will not be ordinary people. Therefore, at this time, it is possible that someone is looking for him and actually comes here to see him. Xiaozhen can definitely guess who it is. He didn't lean on the edge and yell, nor cry hysterically why, nor did he pretend to look pitiful, although he knew that he was indeed pitiful as he was now. He knew clearly that the man should understand what kind of torture it was to wear a dirty suit. A figure appeared in front of him. The man walked very slowly and cautiously. This posture seemed like his whole life. Be careful. Trembling. Like walking on thin ice. This can be said to be a kind of persistence, adhering to one's own way of life and philosophy of life, but it can also be said to be a kind of cowardice. It seems that I can only live within the rules and regulations I was accustomed to in my early life, and dare not go beyond the limits. He was once his idol. Before he became a listener, he was a well-known backbone in the game industry. Later, he started a business with him, and then the two of them became listeners one after another. The first days of loneliness and fear were passed by him under his care. He began to get stronger and stronger, but still maintained his original intention. At first, he thought it was his calmness, but slowly, he began to feel no longer satisfy his calmness again. Especially when the broadcast came that day, I actually saw him so scared that he was hiding in the corner of the desk, trembling and crying. Dreams are beautiful, but they can also be broken. At that moment, my dream was shattered. So he did whatever it took to force his idol to move forward with his dream. The pursuit that was out of reach for others seemed to be completely within his reach. Everything is so natural. I felt that I understood him very well, but slowly, I found that I still couldn't really understand him. Sometimes, I also felt that he was hiding something, but as time went by, it seemed that he was hiding something. It doesn't matter anymore. Just like Zhang Suiliang, who has become an octogenarian in the future, answered in an interview with reporters why he chose not to resist and give up the Northeast. In fact, it has lost its own meaning. History has concluded, and no matter what you say, it still cannot be completely restored. Its image. He came. The dark shadows gradually became clearer. His appearance was revealed. Wearing a burgundy suit and an exquisite tie, he is still so meticulous. He has always felt that he is a successful person and has always lived according to the living standards of successful people. This is very clear to Xiaozhen. Xiaozhen saw him, his boss. This scene. It should have been a little embarrassing. Because my boss seems to be the initiator of this matter. But now it looks like his boss is visiting him in prison. But the embarrassment that should have occurred did not occur. The two people have lived together for a long time, especially in the years after they became listeners. They exchanged their fears and insights with each other. This kind of communication is even better than a direct physical relationship. It can bring two people closer together. After all, even a truly loving couple may not have such an opportunity. You're here. Ji Zhen said. Here we are, Boss Liang replied, I brought you some oranges. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1001. Here we are, Boss Liang replied, I brought you some oranges. Hearing this, Xie Zhen smiled and said, it's a pity that there are no railroad tracks behind, so we couldn't get on the train. Liang Sen squatted down across the round platform. There seemed to be no barrier between the two people, but both of them knew that there was a line between them. Su Yuhang's words, please sleep for another 2,000 years, were equivalent to replacing the broadcast. Draw a circle here. It's a bit like the circle Sun Wukong drew for Tang Monk in Journey to the West. It's just that the inner circle is infinitely large and the outer circle is infinitesimal. Ji Zhen didn't say anything else, didn't talk, didn't cry, and didn't beg. He just continued to maintain his original posture without any changes. Your level has improved. Boss Liang was like a wife or husband visiting the prison. Seeing his significant other staying in the cell with a decadent look on his face through the screen, Boss Liang had to find some topics to talk about. But do you think I can prove the truth here? Xie Zhen raised his head and looked at Boss Liang. I can't survive that time. Yes, those who can't endure it are racing against time, against loneliness, and against all kinds of things that exist or don't exist. The current improvement in realm is nothing more than intentionally planting flowers but not blooming, but not intentionally planting willows to create shade. It's not that this really gave Xie Zhen endless hope. He does not have a small universe, and it is impossible for him to burst into a small universe every time. He is completely different from that psychotic person. Boss Liang sat down on the edge, like two old friends having a heart-to-heart talk at a reunion. You know, I didn't expect this. Boss Liang's first sentence seemed to be excusing himself. At the same time, he also admitted that he was indeed involved in this matter and even played a role in it. It comes to the role of push hands. Ji Zhen was not angry, let alone roaring. He just shook his head slightly, because he had nothing to say, and this matter had become a foregone conclusion. Su Yuhang, representing the will of broadcasting, drew a circle here, banning himself permanently. Even big-shot listeners probably would not be able to shake this circle. As for the boss in front of me, perhaps. He used to be my benchmark, my idol, and my life mentor. But in the past 2 years, he has become increasingly disappointed. Because I have been disappointed for a long time, there is no unrealistic despair. In fact, there is not much utilitarianism in this, but it will more or less have an emotional attachment. For example, the 4 Subai who used to live in Lao Fang's house still seem to be scheming with each other, but there is always a relationship between the 4. There will be some entanglements that transcend interest relationships. Whether they admit it or not, this kind of thing actually does exist. Boss Liang took out an orange from the plastic bag, peeled it, opened half of it, and threw it to his friends. However, the orange completely evaporated the moment it crossed the line, and not even a little bit of the orange smell wafted away. Boss Liang was stunned for a moment, looked at the oranges he bought, then tore off a piece of the orange in his hand and put it into his mouth to chew gently. It was a bit sour and the taste was not very good. I still don't know how to pick oranges, Boss Liang murmured to himself. He usually kept his fingers clear of Yang Chun Shui, and it was pretty much the same as opening his mouth when he could reach out for food and clothes. You sound like you know how to pick other things. Xie Zhen glanced at Boss Liang outside. Besides typing code, what else can you do? It's not good if the orange is too small or too big. If it's too small, it won't develop well. If it's too big, it's not good. The peel is generally thick. Try to choose oranges with a medium body, and then look at the shape of the orange base. Oranges with flat or concave bases will be sweet, while oranges with raised bases will be sour. Boss Liang nodded when he heard this. I understand. Then, the two fell into the silence again, slightly embarrassed. Perhaps neither of them expected that the emotion of embarrassment would arise between the two of them. Their lives had always been a tacit understanding, but this tacit understanding was being distorted at this time. "Why aren't you talking?" Xie Zhen said. "If you have nothing to say, you can go about your business." "Isn't it because you just taught me how to pick oranges?" Boss Liang shrugged helplessly and brushed the dust off the shoulders of his suit. "I can't hold back my sadness now. You brought a bag of oranges to see me first. Who hasn't read Zhu Zixing's back?" "No, I just needed some change in the morning to buy some," Boss Liang explained. Then, there was silence again. The two of them really have nothing to say now. Time is passing slowly, and the embarrassment is fermenting invisibly. One is more sad than his heart is dead, and the other is at a loss what to do. The two grown men walked to this field, feeling helpless inside and a little confused outside. For a long time, when the two of them remained motionless as if they were about to turn into stone sculptures, Boss Liang sighed, "I miss the cocktails you made." "You actually don't know how to taste wine at all." Xie Zhen ruthlessly destroyed the situation. In the past, some things were embarrassing or inconvenient to say, or it was not suitable to say for the fun of life, but now, it is a broken jar anyway. "I still know a little bit about it," Boss Liang explained. "Last time we ran out of red wine at home, I went to a small supermarket outside and bought a bottle worth 20 yuan and poured you a glass. You said it tasted quite authentic." Boss Liang. "Also, sometimes you want coffee, but I'm too lazy to grind it and just make it for you with Nestle's instant coffee. You still sit there and sip it one bite at a time while reading the newspaper, and you don't taste any difference." Boss Liang. "Okay, don't say any more." Boss Liang raised his hand to indicate that it was enough. "If you say any more, my eyes will get wet." "Liang Sen, let's go. You being here makes me feel a little sick." Xie Zhen looked at Liang Sen mockingly. "I have no qualifications or reason to say anything to you, because in the eyes of outsiders, I was brought up by you. Yes, I have always had your protection, so I can get to where I am today step by step. Whether others want to attack me or plot against me in the story world or in the real world, they need to consider your existence in advance. But I'm sorry, I'm heartless and don't know how to be grateful for once. You make me sick, really, it's so disgusting." Boss Liang took a deep breath, exhaled it heavily, and said with some sadness, "It's not like you don't know what kind of person I am." After speaking, Boss Liang took out his cigar. "You could actually have given the ring to Subai back then. He was more willing to take the ring than me. Even Fusu couldn't suppress him at all," Xie Zhen said coldly. Liang Sen was stunned for a moment. He knew clearly that Xie Zhen knew something. Perhaps this was also because he and Fusu now shared the same body. "That little detective, I thought I could see through him, but I couldn't. In the past, Su Yuhang didn't want him to die, and broadcasting also didn't want him to die, so it was difficult for him to die. But now his use value is gone and has been used, so Su Yuhang wants him to die, and broadcasting also wants him to die. Die because he is a wild card. In fact, he should have died long ago. He should have died in Lishan. He's not dead, is he? Because there was a person who gave up the chance to live, and he was fulfilled." Boss Liang laughed dryly. "Ha ha, the little detective said in front of me that he was the second-generation broadcaster and the prince. In my eyes, in fact, it's more like a poor guy pulling the skin off a tiger, but he is indeed covered by someone." "I have it too," Xie Zhen said, looking at Liang Sen. Liang Sen avoided Xie Zhen's gaze and did not dare to look directly at him. The ghost that lingered in the place of enlightenment for 20 years has dissipated, but Lichi, I hope he can get on the next train. It's because of that woman." Xie Zhen smiled. "I have always felt that stabbing a brother for a woman seems to be the correct development mode of the plot." Liang Sen stretched out his hand to scratch his forehead and took a long puff of cigar in an inconspicuous manner, like a listless shishi sitting on the ground. "Chinese. But I Xie couldn't speak anymore. I like her, you know it, Liang Sen continued. I am very timid, and you know it? Okay, I know. Liang Sen stood up, patted his trousers, and then looked at Xie inside. The original exquisite suit was already dirty and wrinkled. Boss Liang was aware of Xie's mysophobia. This might be a problem for him. It's worse than any serious injury. Ji Zhen reached out and covered his forehead. Boss Liang turned around and walked back. He was still walking very slowly, just like when he came. Trembling. Like walking on thin ice. This seems to be the final ending of the two people, a helpless ending, and an ending that must be accepted now. There is no rationality to discuss, and there is no need to turn it into a Qianyao drama. However, Boss Liang began to walk slower and slower. Walking slower and slower. Finally. Halfway through. Boss Liang stopped and said. He turned around again. He glanced again at Xie, who was still sitting there. Then he raised his head. There was a lot of struggle on his face. His hands are shaking. His knees were shaking too. Even his breathing began to tremble. But slowly, his breath suddenly soared. This soaring speed and magnitude caused sudden strong winds in the sea near Qinhuangdao. It's like a huge pillar rising into the sky, soaring straight into the sky. Not only the high-end listeners in the entire East. Even the senior Western listeners were moved at this time and looked towards the East. This scene, this feeling, even when Liqi came back by train in the past, it was not so grand. Chen Ru, who was meditating in the small temple room next to the orphanage in Sichuan, suddenly opened her eyes and showed a look of shock. How is it possible, such a strong aura? A bearded man who was eating jelly outside a food stall dropped his chopsticks on the ground, his face full of disbelief. And in the cave? Boss Liang looked at that line and looked at Xie who was sitting there with a despairing heart. He seemed to be shouting with all his strength. Su Yuhang, you ancestor. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disiao. Chapter 1002. In a high-end bar in Paris, France, a table of people dressed in different clothes, obviously not from the same industry or even the same class, was sitting here quietly drinking. And Angel died, and she even became the Oriental woman's wedding dress, which made this group of French high-level experts unbearable. The audience is a very real existence, including their personalities, their behaviors, and their choices. But after all, this time, it felt like some of their own pride had been shattered, so everyone got together and used this a quiet way to slowly lick the invisible and intangible wounds. Suddenly, everyone present's eyes widened, and their expressions of horror were revealed, without any cover-up, because this kind of shock could not be covered up even if they wanted to. What's going on? What a powerful aura, an old man with a white beard said to himself. It's in the east. Damn it, is this the train appearing again? Why is it so early? Or is there some old boss who came back by train? Unlike the train coming back, the scary woman didn't come back with such a big fanfare last time. Even the ruins of the Macedonian Empire didn't have such a big fanfare. It's the East. Has anyone proven the truth again? Impossible, impossible. We have just experienced the power of a preacher, but this time, she is even more domineering and terrifying than the Oriental woman who preached on the court before. Pa, a high-level audience member with a strange face who was either a vampire or an elf with enhanced blood directly crushed the wine glass in his hand and sighed helplessly. Everyone, be happy that this era is about to end, and now the East, I'm really a little scared. Everyone fell silent after hearing this. Indeed, no matter what happened in the past, even if Dongfang had two enlighteners first, everyone still put both parties on an equal footing in their hearts. However, one after another changes made them have to worry about it. A sense of powerlessness. I feel like this is more like a certain big shot from the East who has completely released his aura. She should not be the woman from yesterday. Maybe it's the one who didn't receive the train ticket, the one who was a big boss before but didn't leave by train. But that one is said to be very, very, very timid. At this moment, all the high-end listeners around the world turned their eyes to the east, because the majestic release of breath was really like a searchlight in the dark night, making it impossible not to notice. In addition, nowadays, big bosses are extremely scarce. Just like when there are only a few stars in the night sky, when you raise your head, what else can you see besides them? On the one hand, everyone is shocked by the terrifying aura fluctuations, but on the other hand, they are still guessing in their hearts what the purpose of such a high-profile and unabashed person is. That's right, they are true love. The fat man spit out the cigarette butt and asked in a mean tone, "Tell me, since Ji Zhen and Boss Liang have lived together for so long, have they ever opened each other's back door?" After finishing speaking, Fatty suddenly found Subai staring behind him. Damn it! It can't be so unlucky. Just as the fat man was about to turn his head and look behind him as if he had seen a ghost, Subai reached out and patted the fat man's face. "I'm scaring you this time, Fatty." Suddenly, a terrifying breath shot straight into the sky. Probably because of the closer distance, Eastern listeners were better able to sense the emotions hidden in this sudden burst of terrifying breath than Western listeners. That's anger. The overwhelming anger. Mom. The fat man was so frightened that he thought Subai was playing a counter trick, and he was so frightened that he shrank his head into the wine jar. "Boss Liang, I was wrong. Please let me go. I have a bad mouth. I have a bad mouth. Don't be angry." Subai. Seeing the fat man suddenly acting like this, Subai was a little bit dumbfounded, but at the same time he could understand, because even he was startled by the sudden majestic aura, and although Subai was not close to Boss Liang, but it can't be said that it was a strange thing, so he could sense the identity of this aura immediately, so it was reasonable for the fat man who just said bad things about someone to be paralyzed by fright. In the wing room, Chen Ryu stood up, and the next moment, her figure appeared outside the temple, staring in the north direction, her eyes full of disbelief. At the same time, Yan Huiyang also recovered from the shock and kept muttering to himself, "No way, no way, how is it possible, how is it possible?" Perhaps the quietest high-level audience in the world at this time should be the one closest to Boss Liang. He just continued to sit there calmly. Perhaps, he still has hope, but because the disappointment is too great, he dare not put this kind of thing in his heart again. After all, the greater the hope, the greater the harm. It is even very likely that at the next moment, Boss Liang will hold one hand on the other and shout to the empty place in front of him using the lion's roar technique combined with one yang finger. "Come here, come here." Then, without doing anything, he left lonely. However, slowly, when his boss came over and punched this line, Xie Zhen's face finally showed emotion, not because he might be saved because of his boss, but because he knew this line. What does the line mean? The boss must also know what this line means. In ancient times, this was an imperial edict and symbolized a kind of authority. But now his boss is punching authority. No one knows better than Xie Zhen how frightening this line is for his boss. Boom. One punch down. This line has begun to loosen, which means that cracks have begun to appear in this cage, and it also means that Su Yuhang's original ambition of asking you to sleep for another 2,000 years will soon turn into empty talk. Boss Liang's eyes were filled with a kind of blood, but this blood didn't contain the slightest bit of madness, nor was there much hysteria. It was more like a kind of chaos, similar to a serious drunkard. The explanation is clear. The boss is still afraid. I still don't dare to face it. But he chose to numb himself. I chose to eat and grill myself in a cage. He didn't dare to really face it, so he hypnotized himself, and used his chaotic self to face the biggest fear in his heart. Boom. The second punch came down. There is a gap in this line. The third punch came down. This line was pulled out of a broken ravine. Boss Liang let out a low roar in his throat, grabbed the void in front of him with both hands, and prepared to completely tear the entire line along this gap. However, at this moment, a voice appeared behind him. Liang Senator. This voice did not contain the slightest warning, but it was like a basin of cold water, enough to wake up Boss Liang from his confused state. Boss Liang couldn't help but stop what he was doing. He turned his head with difficulty and saw the shadow behind him. This man was dressed very simply, with a scholarly air, and a vigorous and heroic look between his brows. He must be in his 30s. This is Su Yuhang's shadow. This line is the ambition made by Su Yuhang and the rules he made after merging with broadcasting. Although Su Yuhang is not a broadcaster, in fact, even a true broadcasting consciousness cannot influence the formulation of rules. The rule is broadcasting, but broadcasting is not a rule. For farmers in the ancient countryside, there is not much difference between the county magistrate and the emperor in terms of the degree of control they have over their lives. When this line faces the ending of collapse, it is normal to stimulate a spiritual imprint belonging to Su Yuhang. Liang Sen's chest rose and fell, and he slowly said, "This is different from what was promised. You can't guess why the first emperor allowed his son to live. Besides, I didn't kill him," Su Yuhang replied calmly. "You shouldn't have appeared. Broadcasting cannot directly interfere with the real world, even in the story world. This is the rule of broadcasting." Liang Sen asked, "You have achieved your purpose, so now you are the broadcaster. Broadcasting is also you. You can trample the rules for your own rights and freedom, but once the rules are gone, you are gone." "I didn't stop you," Su Yuhang replied. "This is just a spiritual mark of mine, without any strength." "You know it yourself." Liang Sen paused and continued, "When Fu Su came out, you appeared once, and now, you appear again. Su Yuhang, you are very smart, and I am also afraid of you, but I have to say, it seems that you are not completely accustomed to being a broadcaster now. I still remember the agreement I made with you." Su Yuhang's eyes remained calm. "I have also fulfilled my promise to you. So, please tell me now, Liang Sen, do you want to ruin this agreement?" "It's a threat, a quiet threat." Liang Sen's breath began to gradually drop, and the grand occasion of being so angry just now seemed to be just a flash in the pan. The luster in Xie Zhen's eyes was constantly dimming, but at least he was much happier than before, even much more relieved. "After all, my boss has tried to struggle for himself, but the boss may really not be able to struggle due to his nature. Su Yuhang's mental imprint is also constantly dissipating. He cannot appear too deliberately. In fact, his appearance itself is not in compliance with the rules. Perhaps, as Liang Sen said, Su Yuhang is very smart, but no matter how smart a person is, he cannot be smart enough to learn how to be a broadcaster directly." "Su Yuhang, do you know what love is?" Liang Sen asked, looking at Xie Zhen in front of him. Su Yuhang didn't answer. "Yes, I forgot. You don't understand, because you stepped on the corpses of your two sons to get to the broadcasting position." Su Yuhang remained silent. Boss Liang's originally red eyes became extremely clear at this time. The confusion just now seemed to have completely disappeared. He seemed to have recovered and turned back to the Boss Liang that everyone knew. Even if the senior audience who had not been enlightened mentioned it, he could always say in a disdainful tone, "Hey, is that a coward? Su Yuhang, I curse you that one day your son will bite you back." Su Yuhang remained silent. In his opinion, Boss Liang was nothing more than a coward who cursed and cursed before giving up. But at this moment, Liang Sen suddenly clenched his fists, and what was clenched in his fists was the line. Boss Liang's face became distorted, his body began to tremble with excitement, and his breathing began to become extremely rapid. Su Yuhang's calmness finally disappeared, and a surprised expression appeared on Ji Zhen's face. Boss Liang shouted loudly to Su Yuhang, See this line? Tear it apart. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1004. This line completely fell apart at this time. The strength and momentum displayed by Boss Liang at this time was incredible. He was such a cautious person in the past. It seemed that no one could have expected that he could hide so deeply. Perhaps this kind of hiding can last longer, maybe this kind of hibernation can continue, but in fact, Boss Liang's previous lifestyle and the way he faced the broadcast were more like the kind of person who buried all his wealth in a grave. Like people, they seem to be as rich as the country, but they have basically lost the possibility of circulation, and have lost the original meaning of currency. Xie Zhen only felt his body loosen up. The mysterious power that had previously restricted him disappeared at this moment. He knew that he had regained his freedom. This was an unexpected surprise, because before, Xie Zhen had never expected that his boss would to do this for yourself. At the same time, Ji Zhen felt a familiar soul rising up in his body, and instinctively, Ji Zhen began to suppress him. This time, I am borrowing your body for the last time. I just want to say a few words to him. Fusu's voice was filled with deep exhaustion. In fact, during the years of confinement, he did not wake up again and try to control Xie Zhen's body, because there was essentially no difference between him being in jail and Xie Zhen being in jail. But now, freedom has come, and the imperial mission he carries once again urges him to move forward, so he must take action. Xie Zhen did not agree. With his improved level, he seemed to have more confidence and capital when facing Fusu. In addition, during this period, although he had not succeeded in expelling Fusu again and again, he at least accumulated some experience. After many experiences when facing Fusu, it is impossible for the other party to suppress his consciousness and gain control of this body as easily as before. However, Boss Liang reached out his hand and pressed it on Ji Zhen's shoulder. In an instant, Ji Zhen felt that his consciousness was forcibly suppressed, while Fusu began to catch up. This was what his boss meant. Xie Sun believed that his boss would not harm him, so he did not continue to resist. Next moment, there was a majestic aura in Xie Zhen's eyes. In the past, the ancestral Dragon King came to the world and swept across the world, and his eldest son Fusu was also a dragon and a phoenix among people. This kind of first-generation Emperor Yuzi, even after 2,000 years of slumber, is already it cannot be easily erased. Gu, thank you. Fusu looked at Liang Sen and said seriously. At the same time, Fusu looked at the spiritual mark of Su Yuhang on the other side that was slowly dissipating. Since that line was torn apart by Boss Liang, Su Yuhang's spiritual imprint will naturally begin to dissipate. It is impossible for Su Yuhang to come here again at this time. On the one hand, his absolute strength is not very dominant. Excellent, otherwise Lu Menjiao would not have been temporarily stopped by Liqi in front of the Qin Terracotta Warriors and Horses Museum. If Liqi had not been forcibly pulled into a certain story world in the end, it is really unknown whether Lu Menjiao, the godmother, could have overcome Liqi's obstruction. Even Liqi said something at the time, "You are not as strong as I thought." Furthermore, there are rules for broadcasting. Su Yuhang and Lu Menjiao appeared here together to promise Fusu that he would please sleep for another 2,000 years. This was already a violation of the rules. If the destruction occurs again and again, rules will definitely cause a more shocking chain reaction. Therefore, in this situation, Su Yuhang didn't say anything more, and just allowed his spiritual imprint to completely dissipate. "I'm not saving you, but you should know what I want. I only have one request, and I can't take that step with him." Boss Liang looked at Fusu seriously, with a strong warning in it. If he had tried everything he could and ended up being sacrificed, Then why would he take off his pants and fart? I know it well, but this road doesn't seem to be easy to walk, Fusu said. Whether you go well or not, you are going to die after all. The ending will not change for you anyway. After Boss Liang finished speaking, he stretched out his hand and pressed it on Fusu's eyebrows. Fusu didn't resist. The exchange was over. He closed his eyes and relinquished control of his body. The next moment, Fusu's eyes slowly became chaotic, and finally turned clear. Ji Zhen wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say, because anything he said at this time felt so hypocritical, especially when coupled with the taunts he had made not long ago and his almost womanly hysteria. Compare. But Boss Liang's eyes were rare and soft, and his fingertips gently rubbed the area between Xie Zhen's eyebrows. He was like a big brother or an elder, always feeling nostalgic for the children he watched grow up. The emotion is in it. It's useless to go to Subai and the others, boss. No matter it's the arrangement of the first emperor or the will of the broadcaster, I can't defeat you. I can only feel wrong to you. There was a look of surprise on Xie Zhen's face. He didn't know what was happening outside. Of course, Subai and Chen Ryu went to the west to kill people to preach. This matter caused a sensation in the east, west, and even the world's high-end audience circles. Of course, he didn't know yet. Boss. Xie Zhen forced himself to say something, because he knew that if he didn't say anything, he might never have the chance to say anything. This was a baseless hunch, but at the same time it was so strong, because in order to save himself, his boss completely broke up with Su Yuhang, and Su Yuhang now represents the will of broadcasting. Thanks. I can only squeeze out these 2 words out of 1,000 words. I want to say something more, but I can't say it. Maybe before, when everyone was sad and heartbroken, we could be free and unrestrained, and be sensational if we wanted to. Ridicule, ridicule, but right now. It can only be said that when the love is so strong, I am speechless and choked. Since we became listeners, our goal has not been to live forever, but to live longer. Liang Sen patted Xie Zhen on the shoulder. We have always been a very realistic group of people, and we are realistic about ourselves. They were all surprised. After saying this, Boss Liang looked upward. Of course, it was not the rock formations in the cave, but the sky above. When he is in your body, you are not completely yourself, so the broadcast cannot pull you into the world of the story. Therefore, at this time, only you can act freely. Boss Liang reminded. Haha, I suddenly understand why the Blood Corps went on a killing spree in Shaanxi after going through so much trouble to return from that world, and built a Beijing temple built with the corpses of the audience in the pit of the terracotta warriors and horses. The terracotta warriors and horses, the first emperor, the Beijing view, the audience, and finally the broadcast made him unable to make a choice and take action at the beginning. His return is not actually for simple revenge, nor is it an unreasonable emotional catharsis. This is his disguise, this is not his original intention. His original intention was to tell us in this way. He found the ultimate solution. The backhand left by the first emperor needs to be opened in this way. There was a bit of melancholy in Liang Sen's words. Everyone's choice is different, but the choice of the Blood Corps is even more great in this situation, especially when a person is driven by a huge impulse for revenge and still maintains his determination. A clear and stable mind is even willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of better revenge. You can say that this is hatred reaching an unimaginable level, and it can even be said to be a manifestation of a person's terrifying self-discipline. I really want to drink another cocktail you made. Boss Liang sighed, and then a wry smile appeared on his face. But it is conceivable that for a long time to come, I may have 2 cocktails in a row. I can no longer drink the red wine from the canteen that costs 10 yuan a bottle. A ray of white light shrouded down at this time, directly surrounding Boss Liang. Boss Liang did not struggle, because struggling seemed to be of no use, no matter how strong he was, just like the box theory, You are born in a box and grow up in a box. Since if you are still in this box, you cannot resist the constraints of this box on you. Otherwise, you would have transcended this box and entered a bigger box. Actually, I've been thinking about it for a long time. Boss Liang fell into muttering to himself before being taken away by the white light. Finally, before his figure disappeared completely, I don't seem to like it that much, she. The next moment, Boss Liang disappeared completely. Main Mission 1, break free from the constraints and leave this area. Return to the real world immediately after completing the task. P.S. Mission time, no time limit. Boss Liang opened his eyes and found that he was standing in a desert. Main Mission 1 was very simple. As long as he left the desert, the mission was completed and he could return to the real world. But Boss Liang did not choose to fly around. Instead, he simply lay down and closed his eyes. The blazing sunshine bakes the sea of sand to a very high temperature, but Boss Liang can still accept it. He smashed the bar and smacked his mouth, as if he was still savoring the taste of the cocktail that his subordinates often made for him. He can't get out of this story world. Broadcast's mission is very simple, but it is also very shameless. The listener destruction plan is still going on. As long as it is not activated, it will not be changed, but Liang Sen doesn't believe that broadcast is not aware of it. What might happen? The sea of sand is endless now, but as long as that side can succeed and the 500 evil stars in that world wake up, then the radio will need to terminate the listener destruction plan and recultivate the remaining listeners. So, the sea of sand will shrink in an instant, and even the surrounding area will actively turn into an oasis. Even if you don't move, you can passively complete this task. A lily grew silently in the desert beside Boss Liang's face. Boss Liang turned his head and saw the flower. Immediately afterwards, he raised his middle finger in the air. Su Yuhang, if you can, kill me. Do you dare? I'll just lie here. Let's see you build a tall building. Let's see you entertaining guests. Look at you. The building collapsed. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 1005. The Buddha is still in trance, but he should be able to sense the powerful aura that just erupted from the north. However, an eminent monk of this level naturally has to learn the attitude of not changing color even if Mount Tai collapses in front of him, otherwise he will appear less so. There is a B grid, of course, because Buddha is currently consolidating his realm and healing the sequelae of early advancement in battle. Unless something really happens, it is not advisable to interrupt. Subai and the monk stood in the courtyard in the middle of the small temple, while the fat man slowly moved the wine jar over. Is it really Boss Liang? The monk was a little unbelievable. Not to mention the terrifying power represented by the tyrannical aura, the hysterical and desperate tone in it didn't seem to fit well with Boss Liang's usual style of painting. I'll ask Chen Ryu later, but I'm probably sure it's Boss Liang, Subai said. After a while, Chen Ryu came back from outside, her face a little solemn. She looked at Subai, then at the monk, and finally at the fat man in the wine jar. Before Subai could ask about the situation, Chen Ryu spoke first. I just received a real-life mission, and I think you should receive it soon. What's it? Before the fat man could ask the question, he frowned suddenly and felt a suffocating cramp in his chest. Subai and the monk also reached out to cover their chests. Realistic mission released, kill or suppress Fusu. According to the completion level of the mission, those who succeed in the mission and rank in the top 3 will be eligible for immigration and become the first generation of listeners in the next world. After reading the mission, Subai pondered for a while, and then a smile appeared on his lips. Although he has not yet fully understood the ins and outs of this matter, including the truth about why the always low-key Boss Liang suddenly rose to prominence, Subai a conclusion can be drawn from the task rewards. Broadcast, urgent. The monk nodded and agreed with Subai's view. The fat man on the side also looked thoughtful. Radio likes to play with and design the audience for its own pleasure, but the audience is constantly deepening their understanding of the radio in this kind of ravage. Cognition. For the first generation listeners, the meaning is very simple, that is, you still have a chance to live for a while in the cycle of the next world. As for how long you can live, no one knows. The biggest evidence is that except for the old rich man Su Yuhang and the group of people who have survived for so long, if you leave out the old rich man who died long ago, in fact, only Su Yuhang and Lu Menjiao can really do it because of their cooperation with the broadcasting consciousness. If they survive, the rest of them, like Boss Li's Hiliang, will only survive for one more generation of listeners. Most of the others became cannon fodder after attaining enlightenment, but they were able to survive for 2 generations, which was almost a limit. And this immigrant is equivalent to Li Ji and others who will become the first generation of listeners in that world after they completely clean up the world. However, their fate is actually doomed. After the broadcast has sorted out the world, life will be recultivated. Social order, find species with strong reproductive and adaptive learning abilities similar to humans to guide them, and finally allow them to obtain their own civilization and embark on the path of scientific and technological civilization development. After that, the radio will probably begin to attack the next target, and then the so-called first-generation listeners will become the first batch of cannon fodder to attack the next world. No one even knows whether to wait until the broadcast layout is completed before attacking, or to use the first-generation listeners as a pathfinder and throw them out early. But as Boss Liang said before being pulled into the story world and sealed in disguise, what the audience pursues is often not unrealistic immortality. All efforts are just to make themselves live longer. These 3 immigration qualifications will make countless senior listeners jealous. At this time, the monk's cell phone rang. He answered the call and communicated there. After a while, he hung up the phone and said to Subai and Chen, "Are you?" It was a call from Xiezhen. He said Fusu was in his body. Xiezhen followed the advice given by Boss Liang before leaving and contacted Subai. Of course, the more important reason was that he actually received this task, but he was helpless. Fusu was now in his body, killing or permanently killing him. Sealing Fusu is actually equivalent to killing and sealing himself. His boss just rescued him at the cost of angering the broadcaster. He didn't want to go back in just after he came out, otherwise it would be like his boss had done a useless job. Chen Ryu turned around and seemed to be planning to leave. "What are you going to do?" Subai called Chen Ryu. In fact, Subai knew in his heart that the reason why Chen Ryu turned around and prepared to leave was actually to tell him to call her. Otherwise, if she wanted to leave, she could just disappear from the place. "Go kill Jizhan." Chen Ryu's answer was still concise. "Don't kill him," Subai said. "The first thing is to help you open the Eastern Enlightenment formation. The second thing is this." Chen Ryu turned back and looked at Subai. "I really plan to kill him." Yes, Boss Liang has now been pulled into the story world seal by the broadcast. Looking at the entire East, and even the audience circle around the world, there are only 2 big bosses, Chen Ryu and Yan Huiyang. If Chen Ryu takes action, she will snatch the top 3. A location is not a problem at all. But Chen Ryu knew Subai's choice, because the broadcaster was now his father, and his relationship with his father was already very clear. Others might have considered the consequences and benefits of doing so, but here Subai totally doesn't work. Okay, Subai didn't think that Chen Ryu was taking advantage of the situation. Chen Ryu's character and conduct at least need not be said in this aspect, but Subai still added, "The third thing is that you go and take Jizhen away. Come here, or bring it to us." "Impossible." Chen Ryu refused directly. "Why didn't you say that the third thing is to protect you? Does this mean that I will have to become your thug in the future? Stop another big boss. If there are other big boss level listeners who want to take action, you are responsible for stopping it," the monk suggested, Firstly, to prevent Yan Huiyong from taking action, and secondly to prevent someone from the east and west from accidentally preaching during this period. Subai looked at Chen Ryu, and Chen Ryu nodded, agreeing. In this way, if Chen Ryu later helps Subai unlock the seal of the Eastern Enlightenment place, then she and Subai will not owe each other anything. Fatty in the wine jar asked at this moment, is Xie Zhen in Qinhuangdao now? The voice on the monk's cell phone can naturally be heard by everyone present, no matter how quiet it is. Yes, in Qinhuangdao. The monk hesitated and said, Dabai, let's go pick him up. The reason why the monk made this choice is very simple and practical. Nowadays, the Buddha has no fighting power, and the fat man's Taoist heart is unstable and needs to rest. In short, 2 of the 4 people cannot take action now. It is better to give them some time to rest. He, moreover, just explained what Liang Sen had left on the phone, which was the purpose of the blood corpse. This point, because the monk knew that everyone could hear the content on the phone, he did not repeat it too much. This means that these 3 Western high-level listeners are still useful, but they can be modified and take over the explanation. Let Fusu take the initiative to enter the body of one of them and let him put on the armor. Because whoever Fusu enters is identified as a non-listener, and the radio cannot intervene by pulling you into the world of the story. Perhaps, Blood Corpse came up with such a solution after his wife died in front of him because of the 5-minute mission broadcast. Whether it is General Qin's armor or these 3 high-level Western powerhouses, it is best to put them here. Unless there is a big-name audience, Chen Ryu should also stay here, which is equivalent to another heavy insurance. The monk believes that Chen Ryu will not have this tacit understanding. Although there is no promise of the 4th thing, since Chen Ryu can no longer participate in this hunt, she should not mind tilting her chair to the other side. One time. Without further delay, let's set off now. Subai took a deep breath and said, I will try to complete the advancement on the way. Monk, you can give Xie Zhen another call and ask him to move closer to us. As for how to save his life, we don't need to teach him. The monk nodded. Although he was still a little injured, he could only recover as much as possible on the road like Subai. After everything was discussed, Subai looked at the fat man and the monk seriously, smiled and said, you really don't have anything else on your mind. You must know that even Chen Ryu had an indifferent attitude and made a gesture of wanting to intercept and kill Xie Zhen. Subai didn't think that the fat man and the monk would not be tempted by this. If you keep doing it for so long, won't you die in the end? The fat man looked at it openly. It's better to do something to bring your father down. No matter whether it succeeds or not, it's always more interesting than just doing it all the time. Much more. Haha, if your father is removed from power, you will be in power. How great. My friend's father is a radio broadcaster, which sounds much better than my friend's. The poor monk thinks that the flaw in the broadcast this time is a bit big. Because Fusu is in Ji Zhen's body, the broadcast cannot determine whether Ji Zhen is a pure listener, and therefore cannot draw him into the story world. But in this case, the broadcast is equivalent to knowing that Fusu and Xie Zhen are now in a symbiotic state, but it has issued a realistic mission to kill Fusu, which has broken the rules of the broadcast. Realistic tasks are used by radio to order listeners to solve factors that undermine the stability of the world and do not belong to scientific and technological civilization in the real world. Unless the cause of a certain listener is too great, the real-life killing task will not be issued. Therefore, the order of the broadcast is actually it took advantage of a loophole, which was equivalent to issuing a killing order to an audience member who was not causing trouble. He trampled on the rules and broke the rules himself. Unless he was forced into an embarrassing situation, he would not destroy the cornerstone of his existence and operation. But, since this boat has a tendency to have holes, why should the poor monk keep clinging to this boat?